Okay, dear friends, good evening, Muadim L'Simcha, good Moed, and a very warm welcome to tonight's uplifting talk with Hollywood screenwriter David Weiss, a gem, a beautiful, spiritual, sensitive, creative soul. David Weiss, who is an Emmy nominee, written for some of Hollywood's most endearing and successful family films, from Academy Award nominated Shrek 2 and Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, to the Rugrats movies, to All Dogs Go to Heaven, to Ice Cube's Are We There Yet, and the Smurfs movies. And I'm told that his combined box office now exceeds 2.3 billion worldwide. Oh, there we go. What an illustrious resume. And so, David, without further ado, welcome, welcome. It was a pleasure to host you in person some years ago, and it's a true honor and privilege to welcome you back virtually here tonight. Chag Sameach, and a warm welcome.
Rabbi, thank you so much. When I was sharing that, did that take away everything else, or did it just add that to the screen? I can't tell what happens at your
perfect. We saw that as the main screen, which is perfect.
Oh, okay. You lost me, but that came up. Okay, that's good. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Good evening. There, it's 12:30 in the daytime here. We're talking about joy, and we're talking about finding joy when you feel like an ogre. And it seemed like a good topic because we're in the middle of Sukkot, which is my favorite holiday. And obviously I was involved in Shrek 2, and he's an ogre. And I have thought a great deal about the topic of joy and happiness over the course of my life for reasons which we'll get into now. And hopefully I have something to say on the topic that will be of interest and use to you. I think it will be. And if not, you get your money back. So let's start with just a quick rundown on how I got involved in ogres and show business to start with. And it had to do with the pursuit of joy, or the pursuit of meaning and purpose, because I come from a Reformed Jewish family, didn't keep kosher. I hadn't met an Orthodox Jew or an observant Jew or traditional Jew. I'd never met one really until I got to Ireland in my late 20s was the first time. And I was a kid with a wild imagination. If you're going to get into entertainment, you're going to have a wild imagination. And so I was afraid of everything as a kid, because when you have a wild imagination, it sounds romantic and creative and clever, but you don't have control over what you imagine. So if you have a wild imagination and you imagine that the Russians are going to blow you up, then you really run with that, and you're terrified that the Russians are going to blow you up right then. I thought that all the missiles that they were aiming at the United States were aimed at my house. I was also afraid of black holes. So I didn't know where they were, and I really thought that they might be in my house. And so I would go to the bathroom at 2 or 3 in the morning as a 6-year-old kid, and I would literally put my hand out and grab onto the doorknob, and then put my other hand out and reach down to see if my fingers disappeared into the black hole. Because if they disappeared, then I knew there was a black hole in the darkness in the hallway, and I wanted to get back to my room before I got sucked into the black hole. So I was terrified of that. You have a wild imagination. You don't have control over what you imagine. So I became the kid that looked for a way to feel better about those frightening things. And I did it through being the funny kid and the entertaining kid. And I put on a show. I told jokes. I was the class clown. I wrote stories. I put on Purim spiels. I did that. It was all about show business for me. And if you put on a show, you're so excited and there's so much fun. Everyone's looking at you and talking about you, and you're laughing, and you just get excited and you forget about your anxiety. But I was a very anxious, worried kid. And so show business, while I was putting on a show, I felt great. The problem with that as a plan to feel happy or feel better is that show business is a high pressure situation. And it's big budgets, it's large personalities, everything's got to be a big success, and you don't have control over what succeeds. You know, every 10 movies, 9 of them flop, and maybe 1 of them is any good. But you got to go into the studio and say, "Oh, I got an idea that's really great, and this is going to make you a lot of money." And you're not allowed to say "blee netter" in a studio meeting when you're talking to the studio chief. They don't know what "blee netter" means. So it's going to be a huge hit, blee netter, without making a vow, you know. So there's just a ton of pressure. Also, fame is so fleeting. You're looking for that fame if you were like me and you were fighting fear and emptiness. And because in the Reform movement, there was no talk of God. There was no deep spirituality. What we talked about in the Reform movement was the paintings of Chagall, the Holocaust, and planting trees in Israel. And I think I've told you guys when I was there that we used to have those cardboard cutouts. You put a quarter, in the 50-cent piece or whatever in the cardboard cutout, and you filled it up. Then they would plant a tree in Israel. I even worried about the cardboard cutouts because I thought, how many trees did they kill to print that thing? So I was worried about everything. And those three things, we called that was sort of the Chagall, the trees in Israel, and the Holocaust. That was sort of the holy trinity of my Judaism growing up. And it wasn't enough to make me feel safe or happy, so I went looking for more meaning. And I wound up looking for it in the church because all my friends in Ventura, California, where I grew up, this little town, they were all Christians. And so I became a born-again Christian about the time I was 18. And I got really heavily involved in doing evangelism and doing missionary work and working in the church with the youth groups. And that was and that gave me a sense of purpose and meaning because I didn't know that all that stuff that I was looking for, a belief in God and faith, which I learned later where there was a word for that in Hebrew, emunah. I didn't know those were Jewish ideas. I thought an afterlife, olam haba, I'd never heard of that. I thought just there was heaven. We wrote a movie called All Dogs Go to Heaven. That was on that poster board there. That was my first film. And I was looking for some knowledge that there was meaning and purpose after this life to help fill that void, that fear that I had, and to help me deal with some of the things that frightened me. Because life could be so hard. And there were a lot of traumas when I was growing up. My neighborhood was, for whatever reason, full of trauma. My family, my extended family. There was real depression issues, and we had someone take their own life, not far from me, on the family tree, and that was very shocking as a kid. Like, oh my gosh, like what, it's all those things. It was kind of like a soap opera in my neighborhood. I don't know, it's a little town, small thing, and people don't tend to talk about these things, so maybe it happens. I am told it actually happens more frequently, but there was actually a sexual predator on our block, a young man that went after some of the kids, and I was at a very young age, was bothered by that guy a little bit. So there was a lot of anxiety spinning in the air. And as a little guy, you're looking for some way to make sense of it all. And in the Reform movement, we were not talking about like God watching over the world and making sense of it that way. So the church was like that was the best thing I could find. And so I was heavily involved in that. And then from there, I went to showbiz, because it was a great place to do missionary work. I could make movies for Jesus, basically. And I went to film school. That was my application. I said, let's do that. And they were like, okay. This film school would let anybody in as long as they had a point of view. And that was my point of view. The problem is you get to Hollywood and now you're looking for a kind of, I'll put on a show and that'll make me feel better. And the fame is so fleeting. When you get to Hollywood, the 4 stages of fame go like this. The first stage is, and then the second stage of fame is get me David Weiss. And the next stage of fame is get me someone like David Weiss, right? And the final stage is, who is David Weiss? It's very fleeting, the fame. And it comes and it goes. And if you are looking for that to give you, thank you, Rosalind. Apparently that's how PowerPoint goes on Zoom. Then you're gonna be bummed because it's not going to. So I got into this business, hoping that would help me feel a little bit better about not being so scared of everything. The first project I worked on was All Dogs Go to Heaven in Ireland, and that's where I met this Orthodox fellow. And as soon as I got there, I realized this business I've chosen is going to make me crazy because the pressure was so intense to be amazing. And I didn't feel amazing. I was just out of film school. And I remember I was working on a movie that would end up starring a guy by the name of Burt Reynolds. And I got there and the director said, yeah, just go up to the conference room and start writing the script. And I'd never written a script for a movie. So I had a panic attack and I curled up under the desk, took a nap, called my dad and said, I think I should come home. And he said, take a nap. So I took a nap. And after the nap, I felt a little bit better. I went down and talked to the director and pitched him some ideas. And I discovered that when I was working with him directly and we were chatting back and forth, that's kind of my personality, it started to go better. So now we're having a good time. We get this movie written, and I was going to quit that job because I was so panicked. We finished it. We go to the recording session, and I remember Burt Reynolds was in the recording session with the director, Don Bluth. And Don they had a problem with one part of the script. And Don said, is it the script? We can rewrite the script. And I was in the booth. So the director is throwing me under the bus, basically. We'll blame the writer. And Burt Reynolds said, no, it's not the script. The script is great. I just don't like this reading that you're giving me. So Don was a little angry at me because the star was siding with the writer. And I just kind of crawled back further in my chair to stay out of trouble. And Burt Reynolds came out of the booth and shook my hand and said, great script, kid. And I didn't wash my hand for about a week. I was so blown away. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I just met one of my favorite movie stars and he liked my script. And then as soon as that was done, I went back. They were putting me up in a hotel called the Shelburne Hotel, which is mentioned in The Dead, I think, by James Joyce. And I was staying in a suite. I'm a 29-year-old kid. I've got a suite at the Shelburne. And I've got a movie getting made, my first film starring Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise. And I sit down in that hotel room at the end of that recording session, and I begin to cry. I begin to weep. Why? Because this was my dream. If I could just get a movie made, like that's everything, right? And I really had this sense of, is that all there is? You get a movie made with a movie star and it doesn't change anything. You're still just the guy who's got the same questions about life that you had before, and it doesn't solve everything. And then you've got to start finding another job. It's not, you think, oh, well, you're just going to get job after job after job and everything's going to be great. But no, I had to restart my career after virtually every movie. Now, there are superstars out there that people are waiting in line for them. I'm not in that category. Despite my credits, there are only a handful of people that people are standing in line waiting for these actors or writers to become available. It's small as 10, 15, 20, 100 at the most. And I'm not on that list. I'm probably in the top late 200, maybe 300. And those people, I'll go months and months. I've gone 2 years at a time without landing a job. I'm just pitching and going to meetings and saying, here's an idea. How about this idea? And people go, thank you, very interesting. And nothing happens. I have thought my career is over for about 30 years. I just always think this is the end of my career. And then something happens, thank God. So I spent the first 20 years of my career always being anxious. And that was no fun. I did not like that. I've worked on projects with Robin Williams. And he's, again, back to the pressure of the business. Robin, he had a lot of other things going on. He had some not just some mental illness issues going on with the disease that was happening, but he was a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And while being sober, he didn't have that same rush and high and fix that he was used to. And he had to do, anyway, so we lost Robin in the middle of a pitch of a project. And just have worked on a lot of projects with a lot of different people that, it's harder than you think it's going to be. Of late, and then to put it all in perspective, after 25 years, my marriage, which had been sort of my one kind of steady thing, it had always been a little difficult. My wife came from some trauma and drama, and I came from some trauma and drama. And so we were always it was a codependent, difficult kind of thing going on there. And unfortunately, about 3 years ago, we just got to the place where, working with our rabbis and therapists and counselors and stuff, it just seemed like it was the best thing to do was to go our separate ways. And the pain of that was, that's hard for me to describe. And, everyone in life goes through some various pains and loss, and that was really difficult for me. 2 years ago was my first Rosh Hashanah outside of that situation. And it was the hardest Rosh Hashanah of my life for sure, and one of the saddest days of my life. And we're going into this period, which is called Zaman Simchat Dayenu, the time of our happiness. And I'm in a situation where my son has sort of taken my wife's side of things, so he doesn't want to talk to me. My daughter is still close to me at that moment. She's being lovely and is going to come and hang out with me. So I'm walking along, and I had heard a lecture some years earlier by Rabbi Shimon Green out of Israel, and he told this really wonderful story. And he was talking about happiness, and he said, people will sometimes say they're in a bad mood. And he said, I don't like the word mood, because a mood sounds like something that happens to you. Yeah, can't do anything about this. It's a mood. I'm in a bad mood. I got to wait for it to go away. He said, I prefer the word state. Well, my current state isn't so great, because a state sounds like something that will be altered. There's a movie called Altered States, right? So he said, just to prove the point, Next time you're in a bad mood, change your state. And he said, how are you going to do that? And he said, well, here's an example. Go to the mirror, look in the mirror, and smile, and say, hi, hi, hi. I'm watching your faces. I got laughter, smile, smile, laughter, smile, laughter. Look at that. That's amazing because it's not even your face. Imagine what happens when it's your face. Now, see, I didn't get the joy of it because I'm looking in the camera. I'm going to look at my own picture for a second. It won't work quite the same because my eyes don't line up. But watch this here. Hi. I look ridiculous. And you're laughing again. I look ridiculous. If you guys look in the mirror and you do it, you look ridiculous. But a moment ago, I was in a bad mood. And now I'm laughing and smiling. It looks like we have some influence and some control over our state. And that was his point. Now, there's been so much research done on this, and I'm sure you guys have heard many lectures and read books about it. It is just the truth. The first book I read about this kind of positive thinking thing was by Miriam Adahan, her famous set of books, It's All a Gift. And one of the things she said in that book that made me so happy was that she acknowledged the painful truth that I was facing, which is I don't want to hear about positive thinking. I don't want to hear about it because positive thinking suggests that I have to change my state, that my happiness is up to me. And I'm the idiot that isn't happy. So I don't want to be put in charge of my happiness. I'm the last guy that should be in charge of my happiness. But then comes Shimon Green, Rabbi Shimon Green, and he says, hi, how you doing? Hi. And I'm laughing and I'm smiling. But when we're done with this little meeting, go to the mirror and try it and you'll see that it really works. The other thing that I discovered, we had close friends and close family members that had issues with chemical dependencies. I mean, I'm in Hollywood, that's what goes on. And I got involved in a 12-step recovery group that was a support group for people who have people, with these issues. So I myself, thank God, don't have that issue, but there are a number of people very close to me that do have these issues. And so I got involved in this 12-step group. And I heard about it because someone was telling me about Rabbi Abraham Tversky. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rabbi Tversky. He is amazing. One second. He used to run the Pittsburgh Hospital's Chemical Dependency Recovery Center. And in fact, it's one of his great books, Growing Each Day by Rabbi Tversky. The Tversky dynasty, they're an amazing family. He's got a number of these books, daily readers. And in these books, he's always quoting members of Alcoholics Anonymous because they were dear friends of his. He said famously that there were two kinds of people in the world. He was talking about in the whole world. People who should go to 12-step meetings and people who go to 12-step meetings. Those are the two kinds of people there were in the world. Well, it's interesting because one night, my Rebbe, who I was learning Gemara with, and we're going to do the rest of this talk in his honor. This is Rabbi Nachman Morgan. And I was learning, he teaches a class it's Gemara for idiots, basically. I've been learning with him, had been learning with him for 7 years, Olav Shalom. And he was one of the first victims of COVID here in Los Angeles. And so now I'm learning with one of his other students. We've become Chavruta, and I know it's giving him some pleasure. We were in the Sukkah just the other day learning Baba Metzia together with his system. He has a system designed for people like myself who didn't grow up with it. Anyway, one night he said to me, David, and it was just as my divorce was starting to kick in and I was in trouble. The kids were having problems. Just everything seemed kind of crazy and bleak. And I had mentioned to him a little bit of it. And he said, how are you always so happy? You're always so, I can't believe this is going on in your life. And you're one of the happiest guys I know. And I was delighted to hear that because I don't feel that. I just feel what's going on in my life. And sometimes it seems very hard. And I said, well, I'll tell you, A, my Yiddishkeit, I mean, just Amunah and Hashem. But B, what's really given that some teeth are these 12 steps. And he says, what are the 12 steps? So there was no one else in the class that night. So we sat that evening and we learned the steps. And I won't go through all of them tonight. You guys can look them up. But it's just Torah. And that's what he said. At the end of our evening, he said, David, like Rabbi Tversky, and he's a big fan of Rabbi Tversky's, this is Torah. And so I had gotten to this place where, I was learning that I was in charge of my own happiness. And one of the steps, step 11, is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Oh, right? With our higher power, as we understood him. God, it says with God, as we understood him. Praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Well, this is what I had discovered as a younger person, why I was so anxious all the time. Many of us as Jews believe in God. I was a man of belief in God. And so much so that I keep kosher, I'm keeping Shabbos, I'm doing all this stuff that's really hard. But the one thing I wasn't doing was actually trusting that God was going to take care of things. I couldn't let go and let God. That's another one of these sayings. I couldn't let him, because there's a famous story that you hear all the time, sermons. I heard it in the church. I hear it from rabbis. A guy falls off the edge of a cliff. He's riding his horse or something. He falls off, and he grabs a branch that is hanging on the edge of the cliff. You know, he's hanging on this branch, and that's all that's between him and death. And he's, help! Somebody help! And a voice from the heavens, the clouds part, and a voice from the heavens says, let go of the branch. And the guy's like, is there anybody else up there? Like, we don't want to let go and trust God. But with this exercise, this smiling and saying, hi, we begin to realize that we do have more control. And I started to realize that getting these little, these daily readings from Rabbi Torsky, he talks about this. He basically will say, go outside and look at a rose for a minute. In the middle of all your crazy fear and anxiety and things that seem so overwhelming, go outside and look at a rose. And it's a cliche. I know it's a cliche. And then take a couple deep breaths. And then make a gratitude list. And we start to learn that what you put inside your brain over and over again starts to be the thing that makes you happy. So that Rosh Hashanah, I'm walking along a couple years ago. By the way, this Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and this Sukkot, I know it sounds crazy, has been the greatest of my life. I just feel so joyful. In the midst of the COVID, having lost my Rebbe, and so many wonderful things happening with my daughter, and even things with my son are starting to get better. My career, I'm remodeling a home. My community is just doing so. It's just a lot going on to be thankful for. And I've often said you could write a book about your life that would open both ways. From this side, you could list all your woes and troubles, and it would read like a horror novel. And from this side, you could list all the things that are wonderful, and you'd be happy. So that Sukkot, that Rosh Hashanah, during the Zman Simchatenu, I'm walking to someone's dinner, and I'm as sad as I've ever been. And I don't know why God put it in my head, but I like to sing. I'm a big singer. I started to sing a list of things that I could be happy about. I didn't feel happy, but singing is good for you. It gets air in your lungs. That's scientifically proven. If you're feeling bad, look in the mirror, smile, and then take some deep breaths. We forget to breathe when we're sad or we're worried. So I started to sing, and I literally started to sing about whatever was there that was good. I have my feet. I'm walking to dinner. I have this tree, beautiful tree. I have these stars. Nice. I have good friends. I'm going to go see my friends for dinner. I have a daughter. She's gorgeous. She loves me. I love her. She's doing so well. I have a son. He's kind of mad at me right now, but we'll get that figured out. I have air in my lungs. I have lungs. I have healthy lungs. I have community. I have my faith. I have my Judaism. I had a circumcision. I had great parents. I have a car that's really cool. The top comes down. I have a roof over my head. I have relatively great health. And it started going more and more. And by the time I got to that house, it was 20 minutes of singing and thinking of the things I have. I felt okay. To go from being as sad as I had ever been to being okay was amazing. And by the time Sukkot actually came around, I was genuinely happy. Now, I've had these things go on in my career. We had an opportunity to pitch a project called The Cat in the Hat years ago with Tim Allen. And we pitched, Tim Allen is a big comedian. We pitched this thing to Tim, and he loved it, and DreamWorks loved it, Spielberg loved it, and Katzenberg loved it. And they were, this is great. And then the rights to the book expired, and it died. I'm like, what do you have to do to be successful in Hollywood? And it just went away. And then some years later, we were talking to another producer about that project. And they said, that sounds like a great story. Would you do it with Robin Williams? And we said, of course we would do it with Robin Williams. And we pitched it with Robin Williams. And Sherry Lansing, the head of Paramount Studios, loved it. But she said the budget was too high. And all the other studios said the same thing. So we've got we have Robin Williams, we have The Cat in the Hat. And we had Barry Levinson as a director. And this amazing story that everyone says is great, and we still can't get it made. And what we realized in that situation was we don't have control. And so it gets back to letting go and letting God. If to be happy, I have to have things go my way, then I'm in a lot of trouble because I don't have control over how things go. But if to be happy, I can simply focus on what's right in my life and really build that up in my brain, then I have a chance at happiness. Those are the things I have control over. Rabbi Tursky quotes the famous Serenity Prayer, and this one contains everything. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Okay, look, if you can't change something, you can't change it. You can't change it. What good does it do to rail against it and to try and change it? There's nothing you can do about it. But if you accept that this is what is and say, okay, well, maybe this is what God wants for me, then you have a chance at happiness. Grant me the courage to change the things I can. Well, what can I change? I can change my attitude. That's something I can always change. Viktor Frankl talks about this in his amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning. Incredible book. And how people who could change almost nothing and couldn't find relationship, and even the song I was singing, there was very little they could sing about. But they could change their attitude. And some of them took great pride in suffering with dignity and saying, by God, we're not going to let them take away our dignity. I had a very funny experience with that. In my apartment complex, I have a patio, a beautiful patio right out there. The problem is all the trees and the roof above it extends, so I couldn't put my sukkah there. One day I had a cold. And in catching a cold, I looked out the window of my bedroom and I noticed a patio down below that wasn't attached to an apartment, and it had no roof and there were no trees over it. I thought, that's interesting. I went down to look at it, and it was off the laundry room of our building. And so I looked out there, and I thought, that's interesting. So I went to ask the office if we could use that for a sukkah, and they said, well, incorporate rules and fire hazards and blah, blah, blah. And they didn't want to do it. So I asked a few more times, and it bothered them enough. They finally said they would think about it. We'll think about it, they said. Well, while they were thinking about it, I put a sukkah up because, what else are you going to do? So I put it up, and they didn't bother me. I invited the maintenance guys in to have a beer with me one day during Sukkot, and it went great. Then we invited all the neighbors, and it became the community sukkah. And the next year, we did the same, and no problem. And this is our third year, but there's new management in town. And the new management, a cute little family from across the street were coming. I gave them a key to my building. They came to make their dinner the first night of Sukkot. I was out that night with other friends, and the door to the laundry room was locked. They locked us out of the laundry room. They didn't call the phone number that I put up on the sukkah to explain that we had requested this permission 3 years previous. They just locked it out. And that poor family had to walk 5 blocks with the baby and their dinner to have Sukkot. So I was telling my friends the next day, they have a brother who's a lawyer, and we sent a note and said, hey, we requested permission 3 years ago. And also, it's a public space. And then this lawyer sent a letter, and suddenly they said, oh, we're so sorry. It's religious discrimination. They had a Christmas tree in the lobby, right? So what's going on with this? And sure enough, they buckled. But there was one day before they did that, because we couldn't do phone calling and stuff during Yom Tov, where I had all my meals out. But there was one day where I had to go in before they had unlocked the door. Oh, and a neighbor finally came home and let me jump over her balcony to go into the balcony, that other balcony, and unlock the door so we could get back in. And so it was all a lot of shenanigans going on. And then we got the legal thing, and then they gave permission. But there was one meal, one lunch, where I couldn't go in the sukkah. And it was about 95 degrees, and I didn't know the home that the other people had gone to, and the shul was about a 15, 20-minute walk. And I just couldn't do it. I just said, you know what? I'm gonna have my little lunch here. And I did. And I remembered this business about we're in charge of our happiness. And I went to the sink, and I said, it's Zman Simkatenu. Old me would have been like, I can't believe this. There's a sukkah, and they took it down, and they're being so unfair. And I just spun out and got myself all in a frenzy. And instead I said, you know what? I'm going to imagine I'm in the sukkah. And I thought about Sharansky and all these guys in the refuseniks who had been famously in Russian prisons and who had saved up a raisin and put it in water and made a cup. And after a year, they had 1 cup of wine and had 1 cup of the 4 cups of wine for Pesach and no matzah. And they did what they could. And I had the happiest Sukkot lunch that day, because instead of focusing on what had been taken away, I focused on the beautiful sukkah that we had and the moment that we had it. And that going forward, I would just have to go, during the week to other people's sukkahs, and that would be great. And not to let these people ruin my Sukkot. And I became genuinely joyful. It was a wonderful thing. And that comes from this last 10 years of being in Hollywood, where everything that can possibly go wrong goes wrong. And I did this project. We were working on a project called Tinkerbell, and we were working for Disney, and we pitched this great idea. And I remember at the last minute, my writing partner changed part of the idea, which would have kind of ruined Act 2. And I said, guys, but if we do it this way, it's going to ruin Act 2. And he said, oh, no, we really want it. The producer sided with him. And now I had to go into Shabbos knowing that our pitch for Tinkerbell at Disney is going to be problematic, and they'll probably pass on it or be mad at us if we write it that way and we can't fix it. And we go in and we pitch to Disney. And I really let go and let God. I didn't fight with my partner. And we get to Nina Jacobson, who was then the president of Disney. Here's the pitch, and she calls out the problem in Act 2. And she goes, guys, I really love this problem in Act 2. And because I had learned to trust God and not go to the anger and just, all right, something will happen. I'm going to let go and let God. I claim to believe in God, but yet I think it's okay to get angry at my partner and yell at him when he doesn't do what I think he should do, because I have fear. I have fear that my project will unravel. But that fear that the project will unravel is a lack of faith that God can take care of this. So I went in without the fear. I went in without the yelling at the partner. And I had the presence of mind to tell Nina Jacobson, the president of Disney, oh yeah, we wondered about that little change in Act 2. And we had this other way of doing it. I pitched our original way. And she said, oh, that works. Do that. And then she yelled out, she said to the producer, what do you need to get the boy started? I just need you to pay him. And she yelled out, Maury, have a county get started on their paperwork. And we got that job. That movie did not get made. But it paid for 2 years of Jewish education for my kids. The writing of it did. So that was great. And then 10 years later, Disney wants to do a TV show about Tinkerbell. So we go in and pitch the idea that we had for the movie, for the TV show. And they love it. And Disney Television, as they're releasing this new Disney cable channel, Disney Plus, they want to do this. So we get 2 years of work writing the pilot for this new Tinkerbell TV show for Disney. And then they change the director of marketing and the head of Disney Plus, and they pull the project. And it doesn't happen. But it pays for 2 more years of Jewish education for my kids. I don't have control over the outcome in Hollywood. You just don't. And the personalities in Hollywood are crazy. Smurfette in the Smurfs movie was played by Katy Perry. And again, if I could get the screen sharing to work properly, I'd pull up the pictures of the kids with Katy Perry and Neil Patrick Harris and Hank Azaria. And we were able to sneak little bits of Jewish thought into these movies, which gives me a great deal of joy. But then the studio chief will take it out. Or I literally put in the entire benching for the new month. The prayer for the new moon was in because they're looking for a blue moon. So for the dialogue for the Smurfs, we put that blessing in. And it was in the movie, in the script for the movie for about a year. And just at the last minute, the actor who had to do that part, Grumpy was, it might have been John, John Oliver. Was one of our Smurfs. The Hebrew was too hard to say, so they just changed it to abracadabra, which, by the way, is also Hebrew. Abadair, I speak, and it will be. Right? Rabbi, you have yourself muted. Can you unmute for just a second and tell?
Bara, like bria, create, kedabra,
dibra. Like that I say. Yeah, it's abracadabra is in every language. That's what magicians say. They basically quote Hashem when he was doing creation. So that got changed out. I've learned to let go of the results. I used to write and try and create to fill this hole that I needed to fill up from loneliness as a child and from fear of death and from a lack of faith in God from growing up in a crazy, tumultuous place. Most of the people in Hollywood, that's why they're in Hollywood, because we have wild imaginations, we're artistic sort of people, and usually there's a childhood wound that is being filled. And that's one of the reasons we have so many casualties in Hollywood, because that childhood wound needs to be filled with Hashem and with God and with Torah and with faith and eternity. it needs to be an eternal fix, but when you try and fill it with fame and with approval and with the audience loving you and with popularity, that's fleeting and it doesn't work. And so you kind of end up sort of in a lot of pain. So the way that I've been able to build up that faith in me, because it's a cliche to talk about it, but it's actually starting to become real. I wanted to just share with you guys a couple of tricks that I use. Because now I go into a meeting, we're pitching a new movie at Netflix in the next week or two with the producer who just did a movie called Project Power. He did, this guy's, and it's funny, this is so great too, because of my learning, I wouldn't have known this. His name is Brian Unkelus. Unkelus, who is the translator of the original, the first translation, I think, of the Torah into, was it Greek, Rabbi? Did he do the Greek, Unkelus? Or he did Aramaic? Okay, good. So Unkelus is a famous commentator. There's a whole family of Unkuluses. And so this guy's name is Unkelus. Who knew? He did, he produced Hunger Games. He produced Bright for Netflix, which was one of the first big movies. He produced I, Tonya. He just did Birds of Prey. He was on, there was a whole other series that was huge. I forgot which one it was. Anyway, he's a big producer. And we're going in to pitch with him coming up. And I pitched that with him just sort of joyfully because we go in sometimes we don't have the answer. I don't have the answer, but I got to go in with a big smile. And so I go in assuming everything will be okay. And what happens is because I have that smile and I trust that God's got my back, sometimes we crash and burn. And we go, and he goes, yeah, that's not strong. That's not good enough, guys. And I'm like, okay. I used to be so afraid of that failure that I would freeze up and go into the meeting a nervous wreck. And then I couldn't be happy. And then the project didn't go well. But when you go in a good mood, he'd say that. And in the conversation with him, because I'm not anxious and panicked, I was able to think fast on my feet and come up with fixes with him in the room. And he gets excited. And we kept doing that for about 3 months. And now we've got this project ready to go in that he's really excited about that we're taking to Netflix. And sure enough, that week that we did that, his movie Project Power was the #1 movie on Netflix. And the way God works, happily, if you look at those little screenshots of Netflix, they always have the whose movie is where. And happily, the next week, the Smurfs movie was #2. So we have movies 1 and 2 going into that. Which was kind of neat. And then after that, Smurfs 2, for whatever reason, people got finished watching Smurfs 1, so they wanted to watch another Smurfs movie. So then they went back and watched Smurfs 2. I'm just going to see if I can find that page for you. But it's hard to find these things on the phone. So anyway, that was kind of a fun thing. But to get to this place where we can actually access that happiness when things aren't going the way, it is a discipline. It's a decision. It's a daily exercise. And I do 2 things now, and we get this all over in our scriptures. When you pray Dayenu, it says a neat thing at the end of Dayenu. It says, and you shall know this day, that's in here, and take and put in your heart. Take it and put it in your heart that God is the King of the universe, right? You have to put it in there. It doesn't just fall in there. It doesn't go in there by itself. You have to do it. I go back to step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. When you feel close to God, which is a discipline that you have to work on, it gives you the freedom to go into a meeting and not worry about the outcome. And that allows you to project a confidence that allows you to sell a $100 million movie to Netflix, which is a wonderful skill. I used to have such a hard time going to these meetings because I was such a nervous wreck because I thought that the CEO of Netflix was in charge of my family's livelihood. But as I'm realizing, oh no, he's not. Hashem is in charge of my livelihood. But I can't get there unless I do this daily discipline. So a couple of the things that I do that just changed my game entirely. And I did it this morning. I'll just share this with you. I woke up this morning and I had a list in my head of everything that had to get done today. And it's such a long list. We have to polish up the pitch. I have to do a rewrite on another script that we're working on. I'm remodeling the house. So the punch list on the house, the crew is there, and there's so much, the wiring, and there's the plumbing that needs to get done, and there's the new floor that's being put down, and I got to put in a thing to protect the floor that's got a thin thing. The list is super long. I used to wake up, and that list was the first thing that hit my head, and I would get overwhelmed, and I'd think, oh my God, I'm so far behind, I'll never get caught up. And that's the way I started my day. Oh my God, I'm so far behind, I'll never get caught up. That's the way I started my day. And the end of the day went like this. The scene that I wrote wasn't good enough. Oh my God. That scene's not good enough. And we're writing this project for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The thing that we're working on is for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Jennifer Aniston. It's a big family adventure movie with those two. And if Dwayne doesn't like it, then it's not going to get made. So no. So I'd go to bed feeling like the stuff I wrote today wasn't good enough. So now I started the day like this. Oh my God, we're never going to get through all this. And I ended the day like this. Oh, what a terrible day. I didn't accomplish anything. I didn't get it done. It's not good enough. I started the day in anxiety and I ended the day in panic or in failure. And night after night of saying you're a failure, you start to think you're a failure. So you have this heaviness that's not good for Zman Simchatenu. The new exercise goes like this. I wake up like this. All that anxiety comes. It's there. I wake up and there's stuff going on that I got to think about. I stop. I lay in bed, and here's my new rule. This has been going on for about 2 years. I do not get out of bed until I have said Moda Ani, the opening prayer of the daily liturgy, and meant and believed and heard every word. Because what happens the old day was I jump out of bed and go, Moda Ani, and I just out the words. So now what happens is I do this. I lay in the bed. I'm laying there and I say, Moda, 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 give thanks, Moda, Mo. And I have to wrestle my brain. My brain is like a wild horse. It's going everywhere. It's being creative. It's being anxious. It's thinking of ideas. It's solving problems. It's thinking of problems. It's worrying about problems. My brain is actually not wild. It's a herd of wild horses. And by laying there, this is the meditation, right? By prayer and meditation. Meditation is to center our brain. I got to capture that horse. And I got to make it be, it has to work for me. It has to work for Hashem. So now I'm laying there, Moda, give thanks. I got it. I got to give thanks. Ani, I will. Now I'm speeding this up. This takes me about 10 or 15 minutes sometimes. I'm going to go through it quickly because we got to wind up here pretty soon. But so Ani, now started to go, brain go over here. No, right here. Ani, I will give thanks to who? Lefanecha, before you. I give thanks to you. Melech, king. And now I get an image in my head of the burning bush. That's what I picked. So I'm looking at the burning bush on my ceiling. Melech chai. And when I say chai, like a beam of power comes down from heaven and shoots into the burning bush, right? Whoa. Melech chai vikayam, right? Eternal. And when I say that, I see a ring, because I'm a writer and I got imagination. I see a ring of energy shoot out like when they show a planet blowing up in a science fiction movie from the burning bush, and it goes into me. And now I do a crunch. I have good abs. I like having good abs. When I go to the beach, I got good abs. So I have good abs because I do this crunch every morning. Now the rest of Moda Ani is done in this position. I've been in this position most of the time. I'm like this. Ani! Moda Ani is a little higher. Here. I'm doing this, right? Sheheka Zarta B. It's coming in me. That energy is coming in me. You have placed inside of me my soul. Sheheka Zarta B. Nishmati, my soul. Rabba. Great is your faith in me. You know I can do it. You know I can get out there today and I can do the list. Wait. I can't do the whole list. I can only do what he will let me get done on the list. And guess what? I bring in one more of my favorite words. And now when I start my lectures, a lot of times, like if it's Hanukkah, as a joke, I'll say, let's sing my favorite song of Hanukkah. Dayenu. And then it's like, oh, that's Pesach. Let's sing, or now it's Purim. Let me sing my favorite song of Purim. Any holiday. Shavuos. Why? Enough. One of the reasons we're not happy in life is we don't believe we're enough. We don't believe we did enough today. We don't believe that we have enough. We don't believe that we are enough. And the song Dayenu comes to tell us, guess what? You're enough. You do enough. You have enough. You are enough. And how do I know that? The Rebbe's favorite prayer was Moda Ani. And now I know why. When you wake up in the morning and you start with gratitude and you say, wow, you've renewed my contract. In Hollywood, it's so hard to get your contract renewed. God renews my contract every morning. He gives me back my soul. How? Bechemla. I think I left that out. Bechemla, with compassion. This day is a hard day. That Rosh Hashanah, I'm losing my family, the kids, we're splitting, the house is being sold. How did this happen? Did God, he can't help this? God is not upstairs right now during COVID going, oh no, I didn't see this happening. I didn't expect COVID. I can't fix COVID. I'm just a little God. That's not happening. I don't know what he's up to. We don't understand it, but that's been all of history. But we know this because we say it every morning. He put us back as an act of compassion. So he knows that what's going to happen today, no matter how hard we think it's going to be or how much there is to do or how painful it might be or how difficult the doctor visit might be or how much trouble our kids are having or how much stress there is at work, he knows the best thing for us is to be back here today. Right now, we're also saying Hallel, and we sing, Zeh hayom asher Hashem, Nagila v'nisbachova. This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This day? This isn't the day I wanted. This is the day the Lord has made. Not the day I wished he made. Not the day I hoped he made. Not the day I thought he should make. This day. So I do that exercise, the Moda Ani. And by the time I get out of bed, I'm like, he has faith in me that I can do this. And guess what? Whatever I get done today, it's enough. So then at the end of the day, I do a new exercise. This was given to me by a mentor. I have a little journal, and I write down 5, 6 things that pleased me today. Little things. That morning cup of coffee, that was special. I got a great phone call from my daughter. That was really neat. I thought of a really good idea for the movie. That was fantastic. Man, that lunch was so delicious. I saw some birds in a funny formation at the beach. So beautiful. Things that pleased me. And then I list things I did well. You know what? I took a great outreach call from a friend that was having a problem. I gave tzedakah to that little gal that's always out in front of Pico Glatt Mart, the kosher mart there. I made fantastic coffee. I delivered groceries to some shut-ins during COVID. It's 5, 6 things that I did well. I write that down at night, and in the morning after my Moda Ani, I go and I look at that list. Let me show you one of the things that's right here. And I look in the mirror, and I say that hi thing. I say, hi, hi, and then I read my little list. But I love this cover, by the way, of my journal. It says, I'm not really a control freak, but can I show you the right way to do that? And I'm not a control freak. I'm a control enthusiast. Let me just say that. Also in the book, just to remind myself of who I am, what's going on, I have this picture of myself as a kid. Right? That's me as a little guy. And in the back of the book, I have me today. This is the guy in charge of getting stuff done. And he's also in charge of being good to that little guy. I look at those pictures and I go, look at all the things that pleased you, little guy. And look at all the things you did well, big guy. And it sounds really silly, but I used to start and end my day with, oh my God, we'll never get it all done. And end it with, we didn't get enough done. We ended in failure and we start in failure. And you do that year after year after year. I mean, the Jews are famous for saying, everything is Famous joke. What's the difference between the Jewish optimist and the Jewish pessimist? Famous joke, old joke. The Jewish pessimist says, things can't get any worse. And the Jewish optimist says, sure they can. They can get much worse, right? We make that mistake of thinking that way. But if we put into our Aleinu, you have to take this and put it in your heart. If you take and put into your heart all the things that are going right and the things you did well, it's just a change of perspective. And you put that into your brain again and again and again, you actually start to believe it. I feel more powerful as a writer, as a father, as a friend, as a learner, as a member of the community than I've ever felt in my life. I feel happier at this point in my life than I have ever felt in my life. The future looks brighter. And the reason for that is, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've really done this exercise to begin to improve my conscious contact with God, right? I'm doing the mitzvahs, I'll keep kosher, we just sort of do it by rote. But if you take the time to really get close to God, it changes everything. I have more of those exercises that I do, which we share another time. Before I go into Shemona Esrei, I actually go into the Holy of Holies and I have an encounter with the high priest and the priests and the cherubim, and I go into the Holy of Holies and I'm incinerated. And all that remains is my little tiny spark of my soul. And everything else, the worries, the dreams, the hopes, the fears are vanish. And I daven Shemona Esrei in God's presence for the first 15 seconds. And then I'm back to thinking about my taxes and the remodel during prayer, which every day I try and get another second or two that I stay focused on it. Anyway, I want to just close the talking part of this by saying, it's Zman Simchatenu. It's the time of our rejoicing, and we are commanded to rejoice. God literally says, you shall be joyful. And we know from 2 weeks Parsha ago, God doesn't give us anything to do that can't be done. He won't command us to do something if it can't be done. And we know from this, we can be joyful. This is the time to make ourselves joyful, no matter what's going on, whether there's divorce, whether there's people who are having trouble with substance abuse, whether there's COVID, whether we're losing our Rebbe, who is just getting so much joy out of watching all of his students learn with his system now. There really isn't a thing that has been put on the planet that God doesn't say you can learn how to feel the joy during. And I am living proof. My family has lots of depression in history. And the fact that I'm able to get this far along and be so full of joy, I wouldn't have thought I could do it. I really wouldn't. I was very frightened as a younger man, and I'm so grateful, but it didn't come by accident. He wants us to, Dayenu, take it and put it in our heart with some of these various exercises. I would encourage you guys to do that. Zaman Simchatenu. This is the time. Go in the sukkah and realize you have enough with a flimsy roof. That's what he's saying. And if you have enough, and you did enough today, you did your best. And if you didn't do your best, you'll do more better tomorrow. Because sometimes not doing your best is your best. That's just the way it is. Today, I didn't have the ability to do my best. So that was my best. Cut yourself a break, and then you can grab and claim that happiness. If I can do it in Hollywood, where everything is crazy and pressure is intense, and right now nobody can even work because you can't get on a set, then certainly it can be done where you guys are in the beautiful UK. And we can do some Q&A, but thank you so much for letting me come into your homes.
David, that was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to invite everybody to do a round of applause. That was really, I would say, extraordinary.
Well, thank you.
Because you've taken many of the truths, I think, I would venture to say many on this call and this session are aware of to some degree or another, and you've brought it to light and life. You've actually portrayed very vividly and personally and intimately the way in which those powerful truisms of Judaism literally are transformative, which is what I believe makes them so rare and refreshing.